Hi, I'm Chris Colvin. I'm the host of GCtv, which is a monthly program in which we interview leading general counsel and we learn about their careers and about their advice to other legal professionals who would like to achieve similar success in their careers. I've been a general counsel for startup companies for several years, and I'm also the founder of In the House, which is a community that empowers in-house counsel by providing educational, thought leadership, professional networking opportunities, and more. You can learn more about us at www.inthehouse.org. I'm delighted to be here today with Sonya Sigler. She's the former general counsel of Cataphora, and Sonya is currently the CEO of Practigal. Welcome to GCtv, Sonya.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you inviting me to be on here.
Well, it's great to have someone with such an interesting career background as you. Before we get started, I'd love to hear just a little bit about your role at Cataphora as the GC, and then also your current role at Practigal, and maybe a bit about your background, what led you to these roles.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I started in-house. So my first job in-house was at Sega, and that was while I was in law school, and then I stayed after law school. So I wanted to be an intellectual property lawyer. So I consider that I got really lucky to be able to go right in-house and do that. And then I got laid off there after 3 years, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later when we can go into some details. And started at Intuit 2 weeks later and spent 5 years there in-house, working on Quicken and online banking and Quicken Mortgage and some new products. And then somewhere in there, I discovered that I liked the business side better. So I left Intuit to go to startups and do business development and other things. And I thought I was done being a lawyer right after I paid off all my law school loans. But I kept getting pulled back into the legal side. And one of the startups that found me was Cataphora. So I ended up being brought in there as a founder and VP of business development. So still not back to the lawyering. And after the first general counsel left, I took over the administrative side of the company. So I became general counsel then and actually spent all my time in dual roles. So either operations or business development or finance. So I really learned how to run a company and manage the risk, obviously as general counsel.
Sounds like Godfather too. They keep pulling me back into the GC role, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I spent 9 years there until we sold to Ernst Young in 2011. And then I went to Discovia to help them build a consulting team around all the data analytics on the e-discovery side. And I spent 3 years there before going back into the startup land and really working. It's interesting. All the startups I've been at have either been lawyer founders or engineering founders. So I've been doing that for the last few years. And then I decided I needed to help people more individually. So I love doing the business and I love being general counsel, but I really could help the person succeed as a leader more. So I look back at the 20 years I spent with startups, and my expertise is really in helping the person become a better leader. So in 2018, I opened my own company to coach general counsels and CEOs and entrepreneurs. So all the expertise that I built over the last 25 years, it's helping people in that same position succeed. So now I spend my time helping them individually succeed.
Oh, fantastic. And if you can share a little bit about what's the breakdown of your clientele? Are you mostly focused on GCs, or is it just a healthy mix of all different types of executives, including GCs?
Right now, it's about half and half. So half lawyers, general counsels, and about half entrepreneurs, CEOs. And it waxes and wanes depending on, how people need me and how much help they need and how long they need the help.
Right. Well, it's so great to hear that you do that, because one of the reasons I started In the House in the first place was I thought that in-house counsel needed more support and resources, because this career path can often be challenging, and there's no handbook yet for how to do it successfully. So that's one thing we're hoping to help with, including through these GCtv interviews. So one thing I like to ask our guests is, when they look at their time, sort of their pre-GC time period, and then their life as a general counsel, what is the best thing about being a GC, in your opinion, or the best things?
Yeah, I think a couple things come to mind. One is being a trusted advisor. I really liked having the ear of the CEO and other executives. I thought that role was really important, because if you can't hear the words no and you always want a yes man, that is, first of all, it's not me. Second of all, it shouldn't be the GC either. But then also being part of the management team and being able to make a difference that way, and being able to influence the direction of the company and the strategy, and setting the strategy for the company. I thought that was a really great part of being a GC.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I often think that one of the most important things a GC can do is to be sort of an independent voice,
Mm-hmm.
looking at the laws, looking at the regulations, remembering that they serve the company rather than any particular executive. And that makes the role, I think, both extremely important, but also unique within the C-suite, because you are that sort of independent voice for
Yeah.
what the company should do. And maybe even venture to say sometimes you can be sort of the conscience of the company in some ways, keeping them from getting in trouble and doing things they really shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are so those are some of the good things about being a GC. What are some of the more challenging things about, in your experience, about being a GC?
Oh gosh, so many challenges. Where to start on that one? I think juggling the sheer volume of work. I think the volume and the breadth, like the kind of work. I see litigators come in to be GCs and they know litigation, but they don't know intellectual property or securities. So knowing when to ask for help, I think is hugely important and is always a challenge. Because you think you can do everything yourself, or you think you should do everything yourself, and you come in and you're like, I can do this, and then you realize just the amount of work you have, and then the breadth of what's being asked of you to do is just so wide. And then I think the one that I found the hardest personally was just maintaining any semblance of work-life balance, or setting the boundaries and keeping them. I think that was probably the hardest for me to learn. And so that's one of the things I work with people on.
Right. I could see that, because even though there's lots of challenges with the billable hour, at least, when people know that the clock is ticking, they'll sometimes self-limit how much work they give you. So that's very interesting to hear. What are some of the surprises in terms of the GC role that you maybe didn't know about going in?
Oh gosh, I think just the workload was so crushing, and maybe because I didn't learn how to say no for a while. I didn't learn that no is a complete sentence. Um, and then I think you have to be ruthless about priority setting. And then remember that your priorities, like if you're putting a lot of infrastructure in place, like I did at startups, your priorities to get that infrastructure in place are not the same as the CEOs, or not the same as the sales team. So you always have that, those desires of butting against each other, and yours is not going to win. The business priority is always going to win. So I think learning that is kind of surprising. It was, not for me because I was so business oriented, but I think for most people that I talk to and work with, that is the kind of a rude awakening. Like, wait a minute, they're not listening.
So
I
how
think
do you get your priorities taken care of when you're constantly managing the C-suite priorities that differ from yours?
I go back to the working 24 hours a day thing. And
You're
also, I think the setting the priorities, and educating the people that you're working with. I see that that's like a constant thing you have to do, is educate them about why this is important and why it's going to affect them. I think at the end of the day, if you can explain and educate how it's going to make their life better and easier, then they're more willing to support it and put it higher up on their priority path, not just on yours.
Right. That's so true. That's one thing that I sometimes, when I talk to law firm partners, I try to remind them that they when they get a project, they should try to continually focus on the business objectives of the clients, and how, this may look like a big bill, but here's the business objective we're trying to serve, and let us know if what we're doing is helping to further that objective. So sort of the same thing, I guess, with the GC. You're just that one step closer to the client.
Yeah, and I think that the more you can educate them about how it's going to help the company, either now, like in the short term, or in the long term, that is a easier pill to swallow, especially when those bills for outside counsel start accumulating.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. In fact, I work with startups a lot, and I think one of the most valuable thing for the C-suite is when they bring that GC on, they now have someone who, number one, actually understands what the lawyers are doing, but
Right.
number two, can kind of translate the work that's being done into the corporate lingo for one thing, but also the corporate objectives and priorities and why it actually makes sense to hire an outside firm to do this. So I think that's an excellent point. I hear from a lot of GCs that they can get entangled with sort of the personal legal issues of the executive. Is that anything that you've had to deal with, and how do you manage that? Because they maybe come to think of you as like the lawyer for all things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that's kind of a surprising thing, that the number of times that people approach you thinking you're their lawyer because you're the company lawyer, and kind of having to dissuade them of that notion. And of course, that's a really delicate balance when it's the CEO coming to you asking you to fix the homeowner association problem that they have. But sometimes you either have to suck it up and do it and say, this is what I can do as the company's lawyer, or this is, the help that we can get you, but it's still, I'm not your lawyer. So walking that line is, kind of a delicate balance.
Yeah, and I think it can also be helpful, or at least I've noticed in my own experience, it's often helpful to have a really solid network of providers at various price points, right? Small, medium, large firms that might be able to help with those kind of side tasks so that you can address the issue, but say, I really think you'd be better off with a specialist in this area. And I know a bunch of good specialists at different price points, and let me refer you to somebody. So
yeah, and I think sometimes they just want to know like a real world view of what's happening. Like, do I need to be worried? Do I need to hire a lawyer? So I think some of that real world just, benchmarking for them is important. And then if you do have to go find somebody else for them, I think the people I stayed in touch with from law school, I had a good group of resources I could call on for different purposes. So I think that maintaining that network was important.
You shared a little bit about your career path to becoming a GC, and I actually find that that's very common. Most GCs I meet had a number of roles in-house and sometimes took jaunts back to firms or to the business side and back. So that's a common thing I see. One thing I'm very interested in is mentorship within the GC community. I know you deal with that a little in your coaching role. But what role did mentors play in your own path to becoming a general counsel?
It's interesting. When I was at Sega, so I was an intellectual property lawyer there, and I did a lot of licensing and a lot of acquisitions, due diligence, that type of thing, a little bit of antitrust. And then I worked for someone who was, I'm going to just categorize them as a very difficult to work with person. And I'm not going to name names. And I had been trying to leave the company. And I had told the VP of product development, gosh, I'm so frustrated. I just need to look elsewhere for a job. And he's like, wait a minute, what? You're the best help we've had in product development. I don't want you to leave the company. I'd rather have you come work for me than leave the company. And so we tried to make that internal move happen, and it just did not. But he was an amazing mentor, just to say, this is the help that my team needs, and you being the lawyer that can help train them on negotiation skills. And so what that gave me was kind of an entree into all the training that I've done in every job that I've had. So training the business people, helping them be better business people. So he was an amazing mentor. And then I would say, like most people, their parents. Both my parents were business owners. My dad had a farm. My mom ran her own consulting company on the strategic marketing side. So I would say from early age, I had really great role models to run my own business. And come to think of it, my grandparents ran their own businesses too. So my grandfather was a geologist and my other grandfather was a farmer. So, same kind of thing. So it never like going to a startup. I know some people freak out that, oh, there's no, like, there's no roadmap for that. No, because you are making the company as you go along. I think that never bothered me. So I was fine making it up as I go along, like Quicken Mortgage and Quicken Online Banking. None of that existed before the company started down that path. So I was really lucky. And so I'd say those mentors really just helped me be a better business person, not necessarily a GC. And then I think the people that really shaped me becoming a GC were other people that I had gone to law school with.
And I'm interested in that it's great that entrepreneurialism runs in your family. So that's a great resource to call upon. Did it then come, were you expecting someday to be your own boss, or did that come more of a surprise to you when that eventually ended up being your career path?
It's really interesting. I, at Sega and at Intuit, so 3 years at one and 5 years at the other, I totally gravitated to the groups that were making stuff up. So the virtual reality headset product at Sega, the Sega Channel, which was a joint venture between Time Warner and TCI and Sega to get video games on your set-top box at the time. And then at Intuit, gravitated to Quicken Mortgage and becoming a mortgage broker in 50 states, and the online banking to get your data onto your computer. All these things all sound quaint now, but 25 years ago, they were all new and exciting. So I found myself gravitating to all the new things. And so innovative, didn't exist, have to make up the law or the agreement or the relationship, as you go along. And so I just naturally gravitated towards that. And had I known that, I might have gone into a smaller company to begin with, but I think the career path worked great because I got, the 800-pound gorilla with both of those companies,
right?
And got to learn a lot of different things. And so I think that served me well going down that path to go to startups.
Yeah, it seemed like it's probably good training for a real startup to be sort of in the entrepreneurial piece of a larger company. It gives you the confidence to.
Oh, hold on just a second. Your sound disappeared from me.
Oh, did it? Okay,
yeah,
let me
that's
check.
Better.
Better?
No, I came
Okay.
back. There we go.
Maybe I covered my earpiece or my mic by accident. So since you brought up technology, I wanted to ask you a bit about what's the role that you see technology playing for general counsel and for legal departments? And one of the reasons I ask is I think most people don't think of lawyers as particularly tech savvy. You clearly are an exception to that perception. But first of all, do you think that's a fair perception? And also, what role do you see technology playing in our roles as GC in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. I think technology is a tool like anything else. I wrote an article, I think it was called The Three-Legged Stool, People, Process, Technology. And you have to have all three, otherwise it's not going to work. So if you're only relying on technology to solve your problem, that's not going to work. And I think the successful use of technology in legal departments or in companies, overall, is really understanding why you're using it in the first place. So speccing out what you're doing and the why of what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish is hugely important. And I think lawyers and legal departments and vendors selling into them forget that sometimes. And they really you should use this because it's greater than, the latest slicing bread tool. I think that technology, I'm going to go back to what I said, is a tool just like anything else. So knowing what you're trying to accomplish with it is hugely important. I think if you go to Clock or you go to ACC or any of those vendor floors, legal tech, everything is going to sound great. It's all going to sound great. And use that as an opportunity to educate yourself about what's out there, but don't fall into the trap of this is the greatest thing and you need it because it's the greatest thing. Use it because it fits a need that you have to solve. And I think that to be successful over the next 5 years of implementing anything like contract management or outside counsel billing and getting that under control, or e-discovery tools to bring some of that in-house, any of those kind of tools, you just have to know why you're using it in the first place. And I think that most legal departments and most general counsels don't think that way. They're thinking, oh, I've got to manage my risk. I've got to have I have to have this tool because it's going to make this less riskier. I think that that's a change in mindset for most general counsels.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. How about personalizing that to your own career? Have you encountered any favorite pieces of technology or even just tech hacks that have helped you get through the day as a general counsel?
I think Evernote has been a lifesaver for me.
Okay.
Um, I get the same information across every single device, no matter what device I'm using. And then having my email and my phone, all that come into one device or one inbox, no matter what the email address is. Because when I work with multiple companies, they all want me to have my own email address at their company. So
Right.
having those all come into one place and be synced has been a lifesaver, because like when you had the BlackBerry or the Trio, or before the iPhone existed, all of
Right.
those would somehow partially sync. And then when I'd be on the road, traveled 60-70% of the time, then you're like, I can't even get a handle on my email. So having those synchronized devices has been a lifesaver.
Do you have a particular tool you use for synchronizing your email, or is that just something you've learned over the years how to do?
I just use Mac Mail, and I have them all
Okay.
come into the same thing. And then all my settings are to make sure that they're same settings across all the devices. I
Got
know
it.
some people are wedded to Outlook and the Microsoft 365 suite. That is not me.
Got it. Okay. Good to know. Thank you for sharing. Um, If let's look back on sort of the long arc of your career as a lawyer and as a GC. Do you have any work habits that you've acquired over the years that you would like to share with either other general counsel or other people that would like to be general counsel? And then also, have you observed any bad habits that lawyers maybe get into and should really drop if they want to be a successful
Yes.
in-house lawyer?
Yeah, I think the one that just putting my business hat on. Um, I think the one that I see most frequently from lawyers, and especially from newly minted in-house lawyers who come from outside counsel, is stay out of the land of no and no, and stay firmly into the land of no, KNOW, because business people don't react well to being told no. And it's not that you want to tell them no, you want to say, well, you could do that, but this is likely to happen. So your phrasing is going to need to be different to get your message across. So I think that habit of just saying, no, you can't do that is not appropriate when you come in-house, because people are going to stop listening to you. I would say that's one of the biggest things that I coach on, is how to make that transition to still be the risk manager, still educate the business people on how to manage the risk the best way, have them be involved in the decision. That habit of being, no, you can't do this, that has to go out the window. The other, I would say, sales and marketing teams, I did a lot of advertising law at both companies. They love to push the envelope on things. And working at startups, the whole reason they exist is because they're being innovative. So it's always that rub of, I want to get to this. I mean, think Uber and Lyft. They've thrown the taxi model right out the window. Think Airbnb. They've thrown the hotel regulation model right out the window. So right there, with the idea of what the company is trying to accomplish, you can't be in the land of no. And you can't be in the land of, oh, you can't do that. Because of course you can't do that. The regulation says otherwise. So you're trying to change the regulation by going around it, ignoring it, and then at the same time coming from underneath to change the regulation with the regulators and legislators. So
Right.
it's a multi-pronged approach, but you have to know, KNOW,
Right.
that being in the land of no is not going to serve you. So I'd see that's the one just
I,
first and
I
foremost, you're part of the business team and they see you that way. So how is your advice going to be heard?
I absolutely love that. The land of Kano. So, I mean, right there, maybe that's the name of your book. I don't know. I mean, it's a great, if you ever write a book for how to help GCs, or I'll do it together, the land of no with a K. I love that. That is wonderful. So, and it's so true. And a close cousin of that is, on the one hand, on the other hand, I think lawyers need to be really more decisive when they go in-house and understand that You hear from a lot of general counsel that they would like to be viewed as a strategic resource rather than a roadblock or just a
Mhm.
cost center. And I think that advice from you is a huge way of getting there, is figuring out how to take your expertise and without uh, obviously you need to follow the law and make sure that you're compliant, but at the same time use your expertise as a tool to further the business objectives of the C-suite. So I think that's a wonderful advice from you. um,
Let me add one more thing,
yes,
Chris.
absolutely.
My favorite outside counsel um, is someone who would take me and the CEO to lunch, maybe once a quarter, once every 6 months, and just, how's the business going? How are things? And he was a outside employment counsel, and he was fabulous because he understood we were a startup. We didn't have a ton of money, but we were going to have employment problems because we're a startup and we didn't have a lot of money.
Right.
So he knew how we fit into the scheme of his practice in terms of, you're going to grow to be one of these companies who can afford more of my time. But right now I understand that I need to solve the problem this way. So he would always give us advice that says, I could give you these 5 things, but I'm going to tell you, here's what you need to do because you need to cut this off at the pass and not let it grow and fester, or whatever the reason. But he gave us the specific advice. He didn't give me the ivory tower, you could do this or you could do that.
Right.
Those people drove me nuts. So if you were outside counsel and you had that kind of advice giving mindset, you were not going to be my outside counsel any longer.
Right. That
So I gravitated to the people who could give me real world advice. So if I could tell, anybody who's on the outside counsel side coming in house, that is one thing you are going to have to learn to do, because the business people won't listen. They are not going to listen to these 15, possibilities. They want to know the one that's going to help them meet their business objective, the fastest, easiest, least resistant way of doing it. So I think that of all the advice we've talked about here, it's really knowing the business objective and how your advice fits into that business objective, with giving them actual specific advice and not because they're certainly not going to read a memo. So
right.
just to give them that real world advice.
That's such excellent advice, not only for incoming in-house lawyers, but hopefully out there in law firm land, you all are listening too, because I think that's a big difference maker. And I often advise partners in law firms to ask early on in a client relationship, ask them, okay, I would love to do this work for you, and thank you for thinking of me, but please help me understand a little better how the work I'm doing is serving business objectives, and what are those business objectives? Because I always tried to learn to make a point of that when I was an outside lawyer at a large firm. And sometimes the clients didn't even know. And I would say, well, maybe you should ask the GC what this project, what is and so I think that's excellent advice. And it shows immediately that the outside lawyer is trying to have an in-house mindset, which I think can be a big difference maker.
Yeah, I think the thinking strategically is hugely important. And if you can say, how do I fit into your strategy? You're going to plant that little seed in their mind that you're thinking that way for them.
Exactly. Fantastic. So as long as we're on the topic of, the legal services industry and law firms, what would your wish list be if you could have a magic wand that you could wave and change the way law firms do business? What would be some of the things on your wish list?
Oh, that's a big wish list. I think, the billable hour just has to go away. I think that model is just broken. It's not scalable. Yeah, you can charge more for the hour that you're doing, and that's happening. I see, how many lawyers charge $1,000 an hour now, especially for high-end special, work. But it's just going to exhaust and burn out all your good people. And then they're going to end up talking to me. But fundamentally, most legal work is a project. And you can bid the project just like any other business, just like any other industry. You're going to scope your work. So, right. And if it's outside the scope, then it's going to cost more. But I think most, 80% of the legal work could be scoped to a particular project and could be bid as a, bound project. And I think if that could change, that would I think give people peace of mind about the continuing, meter running for the dollars. I see so many people who want to litigate, and then they start getting the bills, and then they're like, oh, maybe we should scale this back. And you're like, we're already down this path. So there's some things like that I think would change fundamentally, especially contract negotiation, that kind of thing. You just scope it. And it would make lawyers better business people. It would be more of a strategic partner relationship as opposed to an outside vendor view.
Right.
That strategic partnership is, I want it to be a win for you. I want it to be a win for me because we need to pay our employees, that. So if it's not scoped that well and you don't have your costs covered, then scope it better the next time. It's a learning experience, just like any other business has. So I think that's one thing.
Can I stop you at that one for a second?
Yeah.
Because I want to unpack that just a little bit. So I sometimes think of that as you have these bet the company situations. So bet the company litigation, sort of a company altering M&A deal. Maybe then the $1,000 an hour might just be worth it. But that's a small percentage of legal work for most companies. So that's one thing I'd like to hear you comment on. The other thing that I often think about is this thing that sometimes outside lawyers do, which is it's hard to know exactly what that litigation is going to look like. It can change a lot. And my reaction to that is always, well, wait a minute, this is your business. You're a litigator. If you can't at least give me an estimate, how the heck are we supposed to make a decision whether to litigate or not to litigate? So I feel like law firms, in my view, could do a better job of saying, hey, this is what we do, and we will estimate this for you. Of course, there could be exceptions, but in our experience, here's what we think, the pleadings phase is likely going to cost, and here's what we think the written discovery and depositions and experts and trial. So I think more granular estimates at a minimum would be a really big improvement. But I also wanted to ask you, whose job is it to drive it to more of a bidding type of situation? Is that the responsibility of the firms themselves, or should legal departments be driving that process of saying, hey, we're going to put this out to bid, and we may hire someone who's not one of the usual suspects if we get the best bid? What are your views? I threw a lot at you, so I just love to get your comments on that because it's such a hot button issue.
Yeah, I think I have two thoughts here. And I've written a whole series of articles on why lawyers are not the most innovative people on the planet. And that there's so many things to cover, but I'm going to start with the 80-20 rule. So 80% of your stuff is going to fall into that I can bid it, I can scope it pretty well. And then 20% of your stuff is going to be like, I have no idea how to, what is this going to entail? So I would say you're going to have situations where it's one or the other. I think that law firms need to be innovative about this because it's going to help their clients. And I think you need to have a good analyst on your staff to be able to analyze all those legal bills to say, okay, through this pleading phase, this is what I see. 80% of the time it's in this range. So let's bid that at that range. 20% of the time it's crazy. You've got your outliers, where are you in that standard deviation trail? So that would be one thing. And I do think law firms need to take the bull by the horn, and maybe it doesn't have to be for every single case, but do a pilot project and say, hey, we're going to do flat bids for these certain kind of projects like non-disclosures, independent contractor agreements, intellectual property licenses for X, Y, and Z product. There's a lot you can do just to start down that path. So I think law firms have a responsibility to do that from an innovation trail. And I do see some law firms doing it, but not that many. I see it coming more from corporations who have lots of legal expenses and they want to control it. So I think those are the ones that are really pushing the envelope and really pushing law firms to go down the path of scoping the work and getting bids that are flat fees or some other structure. And I do think building incentives into that equation, like if you finish it early and like, here we go, it's on time, on budget, and it's early, then here's an incentive for you. If it's late, then I'm holding payment back. So you need to have good incentives to get people to estimate well. And, you know, it needs to be on you, the law firm, if you're not estimating well. It needs to be on me, the company, if I'm, you know, gating factor and didn't get it in on time because of something I did, and that's got to be on me. And I got to be willing to pay that bonus to the law firm because it's something I did. So I think it has to be done from both sides. And then somewhere we're going to meet where
Right.
we're on a better business model.
That is such excellent advice. It's funny. It reminds me of a story from my own past where I was a young partner at a large firm, and I found a really creative exit, I thought, it was actually an IP litigation, and I got the client out really early, like during the pleadings phase. I was so proud of myself, you know, brand new partner. And I thought I went to one of the more senior partners with what I thought was wonderful news. And it was sort of like, okay, good job, but where's the next case coming from? And thinking about it from the client's perspective, they could have really helped me by calling the senior person saying, we're so happy, you know, this is the kind of results we want. And if I had had some scaffolding from my client, that might have gone down better. And
Yeah.
because the firm, and not that the firm didn't want to resolve things efficiently for clients, but it wasn't necessarily contributing to the bottom line, or they maybe didn't see the longer term benefit of doing
Right.
that type of thing for a client. So,
And if you're used to, I'm going to say, churning cases like that and eking them out for a long time, and that's your business model as a law firm, then being in service to the client and doing what's best for them is going to always be at odds with that.
right.
When I hire outside counsel firms, I want to know that they're aligned with my interests as a client. So I'm going to be looking for client-centric lawyers, not necessarily ones who say, oh, I've got 3 kids to put through college. Let me just keep billing on this case. And we don't
Yes.
really need to settle.
I think that's very hard to do these days. I think law departments, legal departments are really waking up to those kind of practices. And I would advise all law firms to try to move away from that as quickly as they can.
Yeah. And I'm going to gravitate to the client-centric ones who I know have my best interest in mind. So the employment lawyer that I mentioned earlier, I'm always going to go back to him because I know he's keeping my bottom line in mind.
Right. That's excellent. So let's get out your magic wand again. And this time you can change. Yeah, you
I didn't
can
even come
change.
to the second one.
That's okay. You can change the way law departments hire and retain, you know, find, hire, retain, train their in-house legal talent. So what would be your wish list there if you could sort of change the way that process works?
Wow, my magic wand just got a lot more powerful.
It did.
If I
I'm giving you a lot of
help
power.
with recruiting. Wow. Gosh, I think going back to something I said earlier, in matching the culture of the company, and making sure that's aligned with the person that you're talking to. So the culture and the values of the company need to match the culture and value of the person. Otherwise, you're always going to have a mismatch. And those are the people that usually end up talking to me 2, 3, 5 years in because they can't figure out why they're so unhappy. And it comes across in different ways. I'm going to go back to the Uber example. Like if you're someone who wants the company to follow every rule and regulation, Uber is not going to be the place for you because fundamentally you're trying to change an industry. So that's all, you're always going to chafe against that. So I'd say if I could wave my magic wand and find anything to help with recruiting, it would be to get this part right. So match the value of the company culture and the values that they actually hold with what the person is. And I think the other part of that is what kind of person is going to succeed in this company environment. So I was on a school board for 14 years, and we were at a charter school that was all project-based learning, and we didn't use textbooks. So if you were a teacher or an educator who needed a textbook to, you know, feed you the curriculum, you were not going to succeed in this school. So we needed people who had an innovative mindset, who were not afraid to try something and have it fail, and then were inclusive in how they helped different kids learn. So if you map that to the legal side, what's going to make someone successful in this legal department? What's going to make someone successful in this corporation? And if you look at what those criteria are, then you've got a really good roadmap to interview candidates and to check off those boxes to say, yes, this is a good match, or no, it's not.
No, that's an excellent point. One of the things I'm personally a big fan of secondments, and I think law firms should second people to their clients more often, and even if they end up splitting the cost of that person's salary, because it's a win-win, right? They come back to the law firm with a better relationship, or maybe they go to the client, and then you have hopefully someone who
Really good
perform
relationship.
highly, right? So I don't know. What are your thoughts on secondment and other types of sort of, I guess, temp to perm types of roles at legal departments?
I love that. We use that a lot at Intuit, especially when we were all going out on maternity leaves at different times, because our department was almost all women. So, and we were all, all of that same age. So we used secondments a lot. And I think it was great because it was with people coming back, or we had one woman who did not come back. And so you had a lot of flexibility with that model. And it built a closer relationship with the law firm that we were getting the candidates from. And then I also think that placing people in-house did build a closer relationship with the law firm, going forward when they were hired as employees. So I think that's a really valuable method. And I think the try it before you buy it model is great. And we've used that for receptionists and other people, just because there can be a delicate balance of what you need in that position, and you kind of need to make sure they're going to figure it out. Startups are, like trying to drink from a fire hose. It's not going to happen. You have to, get further away from it and come back in. So there are some things like that I think are really important. I like the secondment method because I think it gives you peace of mind that you're getting the advice you need, and then you can gauge whether it's a good match or not.
Right. Now, that's great. One of the things, I'll just plug briefly the concept of using underutilized in-house lawyers, because in-house lawyers sometimes find themselves between jobs. And I know lots of people that fall into that category. And that legal risk management skill set is amazing for companies that maybe don't have enough legal help. And so I urge CEOs and other C-suite executives to think about, and GCs, to think about using the existing talent pool. So if you find an in-house lawyer who is between gigs, they can be an amazing person to come in and pay a fractional fee to just come in a day a week or 2 days a week, and it's a win-win for everybody. So that's something that I'm a big fan of, and I think it like you said, it could be a try before you buy type of opportunity.
And I think the other thing companies don't understand is how much lawyer time do I really need? So in-house lawyer time is a little bit different than outside counsel time. So you're sitting in on meetings, you're listening to more people individually, tell you about what's going on in their department, you have time walking around, meeting people. It's just a very different time allocation. And so they don't necessarily know how much legal, mind share time they need, like to negotiate that contract, because there's some prep work and knowing the business objectives that happen when you're in-house that may not happen when you're outside counsel.
Right.
And so I think companies, if they do the try it before you buy model, or if they bring in a fractional GC or fractional in-house lawyer, I think it gives them an idea of, oh, we really do need someone more, more than
Right.
1 day a week or 2 days a week. But it gives them the data to go on. They're not just throwing a dart at the board and saying, oh, we need an in-house lawyer now because we had 15 agreements we had to negotiate. And now those are done. Now what?
Right.
Is there other work? I think that they don't look at the ebb and flow of what's coming in and why they would need a lawyer. And the business people don't necessarily know. I mean, if you're at a startup with people who are in their 20s, they don't necessarily know. They may never have worked with a lawyer. And the CEOs definitely may not have worked with a lawyer. So I think that model of bringing someone in fractionally is great for both sides. It gets someone back in the workforce, and it definitely can, educate the business side of, oh, we do need a lawyer, or we do need someone 2 days a week, or whatever time frame they need it.
Right, and it gets you away from, I sometimes think of it as this fiction that you go from not needing any in-house lawyer to meet one day, and then the next day you need a full-time in-house lawyer with benefits. It's more of a gradual process as the legal issues percolate up, and so that fractional model really helps with that. Sonya, one thing I know, you have a lot of expertise in networking, and you've told me that some of your advice to your clients as a coach involves successful networking for in-house counsel. So as we approach the top of the hour, I'd love to get what are some of your tips and techniques that you suggest for both for in-house lawyers, but also for law firm lawyers in terms of how do they successfully network to either become a GC or to better serve GCs in the case of the law firm folks?
I think networking is hugely important, and I actually teach a workshop on this. And I don't know that I said I have written a book that's coming out in mid-May.
Okay. Can you share the title, or is it too early?
No, I could totally share it. It's called Welcome to the Next Level, and it's 3 secrets to become unstuck, take action, and rise higher in your career.
Excellent.
Actually 2 of the chapters really focus on networking. One is internal networking at your own company, and then one is external, either in your industry or just with other lawyers. So I go back to, why are you networking in the first place? So what's your purpose? Are you doing it to meet other people? Are you doing it because you had to go to this event to get CLE credit and now you actually have to talk to people? Why are you doing it? So if you can answer that question, like if you're an outside counsel, I'm doing it because I need to develop a slew of clients, then you're going to have a purpose that you want someone to know about the success that you have with certain clients, certain industries. So in case they need someone in that role, they call you first. So that's a great purpose. If you're in-house, I would say develop a network, whether it's your law school classmates, whether it's other in-house lawyers, because when you do get that question, you have no idea what it is. You want to be able to pick up the phone and talk to someone. I think one of the things that I have done since I started at Sega, there are 2 things. One is I have stayed in touch with all of my outside counsel over the years. So no matter whether I hired them or someone else hired them, I try to stay in touch with my outside counsel so that I can keep up with what they're doing, or if they move firms or whatever. And then I have a resource I can call when I run into something I don't know the answer to, and I know they know the answer to. The other thing is I would take out, and this is a little old school, but take out 5 business cards, lay them on my desk, and make a point of calling those 5 people that week, just to check in, say hi, see what they're doing, not sell them anything, not it's just really to find out how they're doing. Right. And to keep in touch. And that has built a really great network for me over the years, so that when I do call, people will pick up the phone. I think that building that trusted network is hugely important for GCs to be successful, and to say, hey, I'm looking for something else to do. Do you know of any openings? Because that person may be hiring. I think people forget that, and they forget that, oh, I should tell people, actually tell people what I'm doing, because they don't know. They're not a mind reader. So I think that that's important, just to keep in touch with people. I think one of the things that I like is, if I go to a networking event, I try to meet at least 3 people. Or whatever, you can pick a number, 1, right. 2, 3, 4, 5, however gregarious you're feeling at the moment. Contrary to what most people think, I think I'm really an extroverted introvert. There's only so much time and energy I can spend doing that, but I do get a lot of energy from it. I know if you're more on the introvert side, that you're just thinking, I don't why am I at this event? Can I just go home and put my fuzzy slippers on? But if you go in with that mindset of, why am I here? And then, I want to meet 3 people. Then once you've done that, you can say, now I can go home, or now I can leave the event, with a clear conscience, or yes, I've done my duty here. Now I can go home. But I think if you go in with the mindset of I don't know what to say, or, that it can be hard. I think if I don't know what to say, if that comes up in your mindset when you're thinking about networking, there's a couple ways to handle that. One is have a couple icebreaker questions that you've got, did you see any awesome movies lately? Or, have you been on vacation lately? If you're talking to lawyers, probably not. But what's the best part of your job? Some questions like that. So if you go in with a couple questions that you can ask as you meet people, that makes it a little easier and takes kind of the mystery out of, starting a conversation with someone you don't know, kind of lowers that level. And then I think the other thing, and this is where I spend a lot of time working with people, is what is your own personal brand? Like, what do you bring to the table? What experience do you have? And then do you have some stories that you can, kind of insert into the conversation as you go? I think when people ask you the question, what do? You can come up with, I'm a dogged advocate, instead of I'm a lawyer. No one wants, if they don't want to be a lawyer,
then they're going to go find the next person on the list.
Exactly. But if you say I'm a dogged advocate, they're like, what? Like, what do you even mean? And then you can tell them a story. Like, one story that I use is I'm the lawyer, or I'm the person who took a group of 9 or 10 kids to the principal when I was a freshman in high school to get our band director fired.
Wow. You were destined.
So they're like, wait, what? And so then you can go into, well, I'm an advocate. I'm a dogged advocate. And this is the kind of thing I do. And you want me on your side, that kind of thing. So I help people come up with that about them and their skills, so that when they are in a situation where they're asked, what do you do? Then you can get into a conversation that's more interesting than I'm a lawyer.
Well, this is all really great advice. I'm actually going to combine two pieces of practical advice you just gave. I love the idea of taking the cards I've developed or I've picked up at a networking event and sticking them like on my computer keyboard, so they're physically there, and it will remind me to follow up, because I too often will stick those in a drawer and see them months later and say, oh my gosh. But that idea of physically taking, there they are, physically putting them on, we're going to look at our computer every day anyway, and if those cards are sitting there. And I love the idea of actually calling, because it's so retrograde and old school that it will be novel, because we have so many email overload issues now. To actually get a call from someone you met recently, what a great idea. Well, thank you so much. I'll put you on the spot and ask you if you might want to come back maybe after your book gets published and give a little advice via a webinar at In the House. If you're interested, we'd love to have you come back.
I would totally love to do that with you, Chris. I think there's so much that in-house counsel, when they get in there, they feel so isolated that there are some things, pretty quick and easy things to do to help build that network and expertise, that you can rely on as in-house counsel.
Well, you gave so much great advice today. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners learned a lot. So, Sonya Sigler, thank you for appearing on GCtv.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.